Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to go into what we know so far about the Metamorph League. Now, the big news with 3.9 update is going to be the Conquerors of the Atlas transformation of the endgame experience. However, just as with 3.0, which was the Fall of Oriath expansion, the big news with it was the introduction of Acts 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then the small news was the fact that it went alongside the Harbinger League. And the Harbinger League was pretty impactful. It certainly transformed the way that the game played for that 3-month period. So Metamorph is basically the equivalent of Harbinger. The big news is Conquerors of the Atlas, but Metamorph is happening at the same time and looks to be quite interesting and might just shake up might just influence your character choices as well. So, in the Metamorph League, you'll meet this new NPC, Tain Octavius, a master alchemist who studied in Oriath, and who may have caused his teacher to have a little bit of an accident. Tain is looking for excuses for his behaviour. I mean, he is looking for what he terms the intrinsic darkness, the reason that he was such an arsehole that killed his own teacher. And so he is looking for he is looking to assemble monster essences to do this. And the idea here is that you'll be able to build your own boss. Starting from as early in the game as the second zone, you'll be able to hunt down certain monsters, and when you do so, you'll be able to collect these little pieces of them all, and then throw them together into some sort of vat, and then that will create a monster that has some of the talents of each of the monsters that you combine. Now in this early zone, you'll be able to get a Gravel Eater, a Drowned, Fire Fury, which is the named boss in the zone, Cannibal, 3 different parts of Cannibals, and then the Cannibal Fire Eater. All of these will combine little pieces, and then Tain Octavius will throw them together into a boss that will cause both a loot explosion and will also add some new loot. The new loot of note is the concept of catalysts. Catalysts are an interesting little twist on crafting that do things in a slightly different way to how we're used to. So what catalysts do is they will allow you to add quality to a piece of jewelry. Jewelry includes your amulet, each ring, and your belt. However, they're going to do something that is different to other sources of quality. If you think of quality on, say, your boots, what it will do there, let's say you get 20% quality on a piece of boots that you're running, that will then increase the armor, the evasion, and or the energy shield, whatever the item produces, by 20%. Minor little bonus for most builds. Fairly meaningful if you're playing an energy shield character, and also fairly meaningful if you are using Val Molten Shell. And then in that case you want to stack armor. However, these catalysts do something totally different. There's not just one type of quality. There are several types of quality, and they will do different things. They do 2 core functions. Firstly, each of them is aligned to a certain type of mod roll. So the Imbued Catalyst is aligned to caster modifiers. And when you have an Imbued Catalyst on an item, it does 2 things. Firstly, it increases the magnitude of all modifiers of that type on the item. So here we have 31% increased spell damage and 15% increased cast speed. These would be smaller in magnitude, except for the fact that they're getting a 20% bonus from this quality mod here. So this would instead be probably 13%, and 13% plus 20% of 13% is 15.6, which rounds down to 15%. At least that's how I think maths works. It might be that it's 12. There might be 12 plus 2.4, which would be 14.4, and rounded up to 15%. I'm not sure how the numbers work under the hood. And then we got the same thing for spell damage here. So the first effect is increasing the numerical value of these mods. The second thing that it does is that it increases the likelihood when you craft on this item it biases all your rolls towards getting this type of roll. So if you were to hit this with an Exalted Orb, then it would be more likely, and we don't have any hard numbers on this, but it will be more likely to add caster modifiers than it would have been if you didn't have this quality on it. This will be particularly useful when we're talking about the Prismatic Catalyst, which adds resistances. So a ring that has 16% resist all as one explicit mod, and you then craft it up with these prismatic catalysts to get it up to 19%, which is what you'll have if you've got 20% on there. Were you to then hit this ring with a Regal Orb or an Exalted Orb, you would be more likely to get a second or third resist on it than you would otherwise be. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing of note is that your quality will degrade when you craft on the item. I don't have any hard numbers on how quickly it degrades, but basically, if you were to, say, hit this Grim Locket here with an Exalt, you would lose some amount of this quality that you've got. So it would bias the roll towards getting you an additional caster mod, but then this would tick down by a certain amount. Maybe 1%, maybe 2%, maybe 5%. We'll have to find that out in practice. I believe that's also the same if you use a Chaos Orb type currency or a fossil, and I believe it's also the case if you were to annul the item and remove one of these mods. Secondly, something that I think is really interesting with these imbued catalysts is that you should be able to combine them with fossil crafting. So let's not look so much at the imbued catalyst because it only does one thing, and let's not look at the prismatic catalyst either. Let's instead look at the fertile catalyst. Notice how this does two things. It adds quality that enhances the magnitude and the chance of rolling life and mana modifiers on a ring, amulet, or belt. What if you didn't want mana? What if you wanted the bonus to life, but you're playing a character that is fine on mana, and you'd rather not get them? Well, there is the possibility of using a Shuddering Fossil to roll the item. Shuddering Fossils, if you're not familiar with them, they make it so that you are 10 times as likely to roll any speed-related modifier, and that you have no chance of rolling any mana-related modifiers on that item. In addition, they add new mods into the mod pool that are speed-related. Shuddering Fossils are pretty powerful as it is, and if you were to use them in conjunction with a Fertile Catalyst, the Fertile Catalyst is already biasing you towards life and mana, but you can counteract that bias towards mana rolls. So now your roll would be biased towards getting life mods and speed mods. I can see a lot of uses for doing that, and you would have no chance of getting mana at all, which again is something that is highly desirable for builds that are perfectly fine on mana without Fertile Catalysts. So lots of options for crafting there, and I think that when we get access to information on these 9 different types of catalysts, because we can only see 3 of them that have been previewed at the moment, but the purple ones, the red ones, and the yellow ones here. But I'm assuming that there's another one here and here as well, in which case it'd be one. No, actually there isn't. No, it looks like there's only 7 types. Okay, there's 7 types because this is just translucent enough that you can see through it, and there's nothing there. But in any case, this should be an interesting way to bias crafting so that the odds are in your favor, and to stack that with fossils to bias it even more so that you're more likely to roll things you desire. I will certainly have videos on this once we know more about it, and once I can actually put some of this catalyst crafting into practice, especially once the economy settles and we know how valuable these items are. Because there's one thing that needs to be said, it's that it is not worth using super valuable consumables in the game to get slightly better value out of your low value ones. And anyone that's crafted with sanctified fossils will have some sense of that. That they're a very powerful crafting tool, but they're not worth using if you're using them alongside, say, pristine fossils, which are much cheaper. They become worth doing when your crafting attempts are expensive without the sanctified fossil, and they just add a small amount to it. Now we have the endgame Metamorph section, and there is some really spectacular footage when we go to the Metamorph official trailer in a sec, which I'll watch through with you. But the concept here is that you run one map, and in that map you'll need to kill the boss and kill a few other specific monsters. And when the deep dive into the 3.9 mechanics was run at ExileCon, it was indicated that you will probably get this in most maps, unless you just blitz the boss. So most maps you will have the option of killing enough monsters to get this. There might be some strange circumstances like Monstrous Treasure, where a map doesn't quite work for compiling a piece of an endgame Metamorph. But most times you will. And what will happen is you'll run through a map, you'll collect all of the pieces necessary to take an element of that boss. And then once you've got 5 boss elements together, you can then combine them into one monstrous fight. And you'll see that when we see a player fighting someone that has the abilities of Innocence and the Depraved Trinity and Core Malachi all in one. And then that's the end of the information that's been given on the official teaser page so far. So let's go and watch the trailer together, and this will be really interesting to go through, and I'll pause it occasionally and give some commentary. First up though is a pretty long lore bit.
Take a clean knife and cut a sample of flesh. Repeat 4 times. Mix the 5 samples in an aquaformatic solution. Heat. Stand back. The intrinsic darkness will make itself known. Observe its anger, its aggression. Observe its changing form. Never comfortable to stay in one shape for long. It will try to kill you. Best not let it.
Alright, so there you can see that you've got, this is Innocence. I'm not sure whether this is Act 5 Innocence or whether it is Conley the Unrepentant from the Basilica map, but this will shift into other bosses.
Plunge the clean knife repeatedly. Try more heat. More! Perfect. Only every living creature to go.
And I love that line. Only every other living creature to go. Okay, so that should give you a bit of a flavour of what to expect in the league. At its core, this is going to be a league that's going to be about killing bosses. About build your own boss, then fight them. And I'm expecting that we'll have some challenges related to killing certain combinations of bosses together. But I think there'll be a lot of really unexpected situations that will come up. And one that comes to mind is, imagine that you have the Depraved Trinity, or the Carcass boss that's based upon the Depraved Trinity. And it creates a large amount of dangerous areas on the ground. While you're dealing with those, suddenly this boss then transmutes himself into Innocence and does the beam. While you're running away from the beam, then suddenly perhaps it changes into something completely different that causes other areas of the layout to be dangerous for a period. I think this is going to create some really difficult tactical decisions to be made, especially for hardcore players, where the cost of making a stuff up is much more serious. Additionally, there'll be some bosses that will be absolute nightmares to kill in this setup. I can imagine, for instance, that some of the Shaper Guardians will be particularly nasty to have because they have attacks that require you to deal with them in a very specific way. One that comes to mind is the Hydra's forking shot. So if you're fighting a combination that's made of the Hydra and several other bosses, let's say you've got Hydra and Conley the Unrepentant, the Basilica-based boss that is based upon Innocence. The Hydra will tell you that you need to get into a certain location, which is directly behind him during that attack, or directly behind her. Then Conley the Unrepentant will chase you around with that beam, put you out of position, and then if he switches back into the Hydra, then one of the Hydra's big attacks could easily catch you off guard and kill you. Other bosses that can catch you off guard and kill you very easily, there's plenty of them, and I'm sure that we will find many, many, many examples. So keep in mind, this will be something else to do alongside running all of the Conquerors of the Atlas content for the first time. So we're going to have a whole lot of bosses that are introduced with the Conquerors expansion, and then we will also have these sort of homebrew build your own bosses that will be coming across. This is going to mean that in 3.9, you're going to want to have a character that has multiple layers of defense so that they can survive attacks from bosses that you're not really expecting, and that you're going to want to be playing a character that is mobile so that you can just get the fuck out when something nasty is coming up. For this reason, I'm somewhat tempted to at least consider league starting as a Juggernaut. Juggernauts have a lot of mobility because of the node that prevents them from being able to be brought below 100% baseline action speed, and they also have a lot of defense. At the moment, they are the most durable of the ascendancies in general purpose builds, although they're not as durable as a Tailor-built Guardian, a Guardian that's built solely around exploiting mana conversion to be as durable as possible, and they're not quite as durable as a super high evasion raider or a super high block gladiator. But they combine sort of second tier defenses with mobility and with solid damage. So for that reason, I think that the Juggernaut is looking like a compelling league starter choice, although it's too early to be certain for the moment. I think this league is going to be a lot of fun. The idea of a league that is focused heavily upon fighting bosses excites me in a way, because for a period of time, bosses have been it has been a reasonably compelling choice in most recent leagues to skip bosses. In 3.8, in Blight League, it wasn't, because killing bosses was how you got your Master Mission replenish. So for that reason, it became very valuable to kill bosses. But that's been the first one, and generally speaking, players have been focused on just killing easy bosses for that. Whereas I think Metamorph might have some sort of idea of deliberately creating and fighting harder bosses. So I'm looking forward to it, but I'm keen to hear your thoughts as well. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. And it looks like spoiler season for the 3.9 changes is starting in earnest next Monday. That's New Zealand time. So for those of you that are in the United States, that may even be Sunday night. I'm back at work, unfortunately, on Monday, back at my day job, so I'm not going to be able to get anything out until analysing the new information until Monday evening my time, which will be Monday morning if you're in Europe or the United States. But anyways, definitely fire away with your comments and your questions below, and have a good one.